Hi, and welcome to another Gorilla Academy. I'm here, Joshua Bolsters. I'm delighted today to be joined by Professor Gareth Harvey. Today, we're going to be talking about consumer psychology. I think it's just such a wonderful area of psychology that I think doesn't actually get enough attention. But hopefully, we're going to change that from today. So, Gareth, lovely to have you here today. Can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up working in the field of consumer psychology?
Cool. So I'm Gareth Harvey, and I'm a professor in consumer psychology. And my route into this field is slightly unusual. So unlike most students who start off doing an undergrad and master's in psychology, I kind of started out on the dark side. So I actually started out in a business school doing an undergraduate degree in marketing. And I was one of those really annoying students. So the sort of people who ask why. So I had the lecturers who said, if you do this, it'll help capture people's attention. I was like, okay, why? And if you do this, it will help people remember it. And I'm like, oh, why? And it turned out that pretty much the answers to all these questions were kind of hidden in psychology. And it started making me think I'd possibly done the wrong degree. Now, I didn't realize this very quickly. I did my undergrad and then my master's. And at this point, I was like, yep, definitely done the wrong thing. If I want to understand how to make adverts, how to make packaging that grabs people's attention, I need to understand the psychology. And at this point, I actually switched over and did a PhD in psychology. So I was kind of specializing how environmental cues, so things like lighting, music, aromas, all of these things influence us when we're trying to buy things in a supermarket. And it was during this time I was absolutely loving it. I started working with a specialist research company. So within psychology, we've got so many great findings, but we generally spend most of our time talking to other academics. We publish in academic journals and no one else really gets to see them. So I started working with a company who said, right, what do we know about the brain? What do we know about the human decision-making, and how can we use it to improve our packaging? So I went on this strange journey from starting off in a business school to doing a PhD in psychology, and then switching over, instead of going down the traditional postdoc route and going down the research route, taking all the findings that we know that work within the psychology domain and trying to apply it in a commercial setting. And I was doing the same sort of work. I was running experiments, but instead of running experiments in a lab-based context, it was, okay, let's see if this finding works in an actual supermarket. And it was trying to find out what happens when we have actual participants who are normal shoppers. So we don't just have students who are 18 to 24 in this nice little perfect ecosystem where I can control all the noise. We had an awful lot of noise to deal with. And it's trying to find out, if I take this lovely clinical sort of finding, try and apply it in the shop, what happens? And that's what excites me. It's actually taking things out and ultimately seeing if I can make money from it.
I love that. I mean, obviously, the making money from it part is great, but also just the idea of taking these tried and tested psychological phenomena and try and testing them outside the lab and in the real world and seeing if does it work with, I should say, real people, as in not kind of weird white, psychology students.
Yeah, and that's exactly the case. And to get something published, pretty much all you need is to find a significant result. We typically ignore the effect size. And as long as that p-value is 0.049, we're laughing. Well, actually, as soon as you start trying something outside of the lab, as soon as you've got noise, that effect size is really important. If you've not got a strong effect size, you probably won't be able to see anything. Or we might even find the effect, but it's so small, it doesn't make that much difference in practice. So if we're spending tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands on a redesign or repackaging, okay, fine, we've managed to increase sales by like 0.01%. It may be statistically significant, but okay, is that a return on the investment? Probably not. So it's actually trying to work out what actually makes a difference in the real world. Can we actually see that actually someone's going to care about this finding? And it's something that doesn't always take place in the wonderful world of journals.
No, definitely not. We're seeing that a lot more and more lately. I think it'd be great if we could you give us an example of a psychological idea that you've put into practice?
So perceptual fluency is probably one of the simplest ideas. So perceptual fluency is the easier it is for the brain to process something, the more we end up liking it, and hopefully the more we end up buying it. Now, designers make the most beautiful products. They look stunning, but they're often designed to actually be attractive, not necessarily to sell. Now, we know that 90% of the world is right-handed. So if you're actually going to create some packaging and you're going to, let's say it's, I don't know, a bowl of cereal, where you put the spoon on that packaging will make a big difference. If you put the spoon and it's orientated so you can grab it using your left hand, we know it's going to sell a lot less than if it's orientated for the right hand. Why? Because if it's in the right hand, 90% of people are right-handed. It makes a difference. It's like, oh, I could imagine picking it up and eating it. And it's these sort of really small changes where you can sort of see 5-10% difference in sales. And if you're a big brand across every supermarket in the UK, that really starts to add up. So it's a case of, we know it works in the lab, let's test it and see what happens. And that's a really simple change where we've seen some big impacts on sales.
That sounds amazing. I love that. It's so simple, but it sounds like it's so effective.
Yeah, and that's the key. It's making small changes. We can't but help influence someone by a design, but it's making sure that design is, shall we say, influenced by good principles and good research. And it's something someone without a psychology background, they're not likely to pick up on, because, well, why would you? The orientation of a spoon, you'll probably make sure it works more with the text or something.
No, that's great. Can I pivot as well? Because obviously at Gorilla, we're an online research company. And in the last year, particularly, most consuming, I suppose, has happened online. So has your research changed in the last year?
Probably not in the last year, but actually we've already been embracing that. We've recognized the trend that more and more people are buying online, even in categories where people traditionally wouldn't. So for example, food, people would say, is that one category where you want to be able to inspect your apple. Well, in the last month, we know 60% of the population in the UK have ordered some food online. So sure, that might be Deliveroo or it might be getting a Domino's pizza, but they've ordered some food. So we've recognized it's important, and probably for the last 5 years, a big chunk of our work has been designing things so it works online. So we now, with some of the companies we work with, we design 2 versions of product packaging. One version that you buy it in store, but another version which is designed and optimized so it sells online. Because if you look online, you've got a tiny little square about that big. It's got to convey all the same information in a really effective way. So it's making sure that we can optimize the product packaging so it works online. We also have different choices about what information we display. How can we incorporate explainer videos? Some of the time for more expensive products, we can craft that sort of experience. It's something you just couldn't do in a showroom. So we need to make sure they're optimized, and online platforms, something like Gorilla, allows us to do some really great A/B testing to run multiple different versions and see which ones resonates with consumers.
I think that sounds really great. And I guess obviously you've been using our shop builder tool.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
I think it's really exciting because typically for some of the larger clients we work with, we're going to be having maybe 50 different versions of a website live at any one time. So some of the big companies, wherever you are in the country, you log in, you'll be assigned to a different condition. But the smaller companies or students, you just can't have that. Shop Builder allows us to recreate the sort of platforms that the larger retailers have had, and it just gives us an opportunity to do that unless you had very large budgets, you just would never be able to achieve. So whether it's just changing whether you use a gain frame or a loss frame, we can suddenly recreate that and see what happens. We know, thanks to prospect theory, people always say, oh yeah, a loss is far more powerful than a gain, but it's not universal. There are certain trends or certain situations where actually you want to be more friendly and the gain frame works. So again, this is where testing is so important, and Shop Builder allows us to work that out.
That sounds amazing. And actually what we're going to be doing after this interview is we're going to be showing you Shop Builder, and we're going to be going step by step how to build something in Shop Builder and then how to analyze the data. And as per usual, you'll be able to download the data and work with that yourselves. I think just to kind of wrap things up, I think hopefully, I'm sure you've already sold people on consumer psychology, but just in case you haven't, like what would a student who's studying psychology now, what should they know about getting into the world of consumer psychology?
So in some ways, consumer psychology isn't its own discipline. We're kind of like magpies. We'll take things which are relevant from all the different disciplines and think, well, how can we use it in an effective way? So when it comes to learning, we rely heavily on developmental psychology. When it comes to decision making, social influences, so that's all of social psychology. So you probably know an awful lot of the theory. It's all about thinking, well, how can you apply it into the world of persuasion? And there are so many great books out there, and it's all about taking your existing knowledge and using it. So I would recommend really go out there and start reading. So start reading, whether it's the books on like persuasion, social psychology, decision making, and look at the consumer psychology books. Like, oh yeah, I can see how this works. When you're going around and start looking at things in shops, asking yourself, well, why are they doing that? How have they done this? What principles of persuasion are they trying to incorporate? Because all the big brands, they have psychologists involved. The music that's playing in a supermarket, it's not there by accident. I spend a lot of time designing, working out what the playlists are to make sure we influence people in the way that we want. So it's asking yourself, well, why are they doing it? What are they influencing? And then thinking, well, how could I test it? You may think consumer psychology, you can run away from statistics. It's not the case. Everything we do, it's all about trying to analyze, did it work? And I've got to justify to whoever's paying me, look, this is a good return on your investment. These are the raw numbers. And that requires some form of statistical analysis. So reading widely and thinking, okay, how could I put that effect into practice? And what does it mean?
That sounds amazing. And if I could pin you down, which one book do you think a student should get started with?
I think The Choice Factory by Richard Shotton. It's short, which is always a good, and it takes 24 effects that you're probably already familiar with and shows just how you can apply them into a commercial context. And it's a really great start.
All right, that sounds brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Gareth. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. And like I say, stay tuned. We're going to start building our shop now, and we're going to start putting some of these consumer tests into Gorilla, and let's see what happens.